Well, wonderful. Welcome, everyone. This will be a delightful panel. I'm looking forward to our speakers, who will each present a brief presentation on their area of special interest and hopefully set a context for a good and lively discussion. I would like to pick up very briefly on Jessica's comment about the fact that we are really entering the most incredible phase for the human condition that we have ever seen. Going back 400 years to really the discovery of modern science, we've reached this new stage of content-rich and fully connected systems. And you know, one of the reasons that I'm so excited about this is having recently joined and running the Computer History Museum, is that it really is all about the human condition and what it means to be human in a world that doesn't exist without computing. And I think this panel represents facets of that, given their domain expertise. And as they set up the conversation, I'll encourage all of you to be thinking deeply about the broad implications that were presented earlier in the day about the structural changes that are required in society. Because technology is moving forward at an ever-increasing pace, but the structural changes and the social condition is really the context, and each of the speakers will bring vantage point to that. So we'll start with Feifei, if you'd go to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. It's quite an honor to be here. So I'll start with my 5-minute opening statement, if I know how to operate this. Okay, so I want to share with you what we are thinking about artificial intelligence, especially from Stanford, and that just as Daniel has said, it's fundamentally a human pursuit. We all know that AI has been moving at a dizzying speed. It doesn't take us to look far from where we are to see the amazing amount of investment and excitement in this technology. It's hard to believe just 60 years ago this field was just born, particularly by this man, Professor John McCarthy from Stanford, along with a few pioneering computer scientists who started the field of artificial intelligence in a steamy summer in 1955 in Dartmouth. And Professor John McCarthy is the very person who coined us the term artificial intelligence. But only less than 60 years have passed. Already, AI is making the kind of progress that would have surprised all of our founding fathers, including this very memorable event in 2016 by Google's AlphaGo beating a human master in this incredible game of Go. I work in the field of computer vision, and the progress in history takes a similar pattern that only 30 years ago, the state-of-the-art vision algorithm is looking at the images and trying to figure out the edges and lines of the images. Less than 10 years ago, we're trying to recognize objects, but today our vision algorithm can be telling stories of things. And we are right now in the middle of what we call a deep learning revolution in this phase of AI renaissance, and especially thanks to the progress that we have collectively made in computing hardware, in algorithms, as well as in big data. All of these happen right here in the middle of Silicon Valley. And I don't need to show you more stats about the explosive growth in industry of AI. But while AI is progressing at a dizzying speed, we also are started to ask questions in our collective conscious about what is this technology like? Is it going to become a Terminator coming next door? What is the harm, potential pitfalls of this technology, from bias to weaponization and to job displacement? How is it going to impact humans, from workers to community? So with these questions in mind, at Stanford, we are looking at the future of AI in a new framework we call human-centered AI. And it's consisted of 3 major components. We're thinking and investing in the future of AI technology more inspired by human intelligence. We also want to invest and study and understand, predict, and guide AI's human impact. And third, but not the least, is that the goal of AI should be augmenting and enhancing to our human condition, not to replace it. To unpack each of them a little bit, next generation AI technology should be more inspired by human intelligence instead of just focusing on big data supervised training under very constrained conditions. Here's an example to show you. The best machine learning algorithm today can read this picture and tell you there is a man, a couch, and a dog. But you and I sit here and can understand the story, the humor from your reaction, and get a reaction from this. And our AI and our machines are far from this level of understanding of the world. And without this level of understanding, it is harder to imagine how they can interact and assist human lives and work in a deeper and more contextual way. Second, we're looking at the impact of AI, and my fellow panelists will even speak more about it, whether it's unfairness, accountability, explainability, privacy, or it's on labor, law, legal codes, ethical codes, and AI is changing the world, and we need to get ahead of ourselves in understanding, predicting, and guiding it. And this also include the changes short-term and long-term of our culture, our community, our cities, and so on. Last but not the least, AI should augment humanity. 50% of current job activities might theoretically be automated. But what should we do? The humans do a lot of activities. At Stanford, we're already looking at how AI can enhance healthcare delivery, work alongside our doctors to improve their work quality, for example, and hand hygiene practice to reduce healthcare, to reduce hospital-acquired infection for our patients that kill 3 times more people than car accidents in this country. We're working with ICUs, senior homes, hospitals, ambulances to demonstrate the augmentative power of AI to human work. So with that framework, we feel all of us have a huge role to participate in this new AI era. In academia, we should be investing more in basic research, in education, and in the future generations of AI. This is why Stanford has launched a human-centered AI initiative to answer to the call of history. We call for governments to invest in AI, from basic science funding to cross-border collaboration to supporting STEM and AI policies. And we think that corporations should participate in AI, not only focusing on their business investment, but also the ethical codes and responsible AI practices. And last but not the least, we're here to invest in the future of AI. And the future of AI is nothing artificial. It's all about human. And AI has a problem with human representation. This is a field that's extremely lacking in diversity. The number of women are very low, and the number of underrepresented minority is even worse. And this is a typical AI panel that you get to see oftentimes, unlike ours. While it's funny, it has consequences. Go to your favorite search engine and type the word grandma. You'll see that the impact of today's AI algorithm in its bias and the lack of representation. So this is another example of 2 very similar pictures where a machine learning algorithm says a woman is cooking while a man is fixing faucet. In addition to Stanford, I have been involved in this organization called AI for All that is focusing on bringing AI education to our country's underrepresented minorities, from women to and different racial minority to economic different low-income students. And it's been running for several years. This year, we're opening 10 campuses across the country, and we're hoping to do more in that. So that really finishes my talk. I'm excited that we're entering a new AI chapter, but I think this chapter should be a deeply human-centered phase for for AI and for all of us. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Fei-Fei and Murat.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'll pick it up from where Fei-Fei started. The game called Go. It's 2,000 to 3,000-year-old ancient Chinese game. What's unique about this game is the number of possible games you can play, which is 2.08 times 10 to the power 172, I think. I may be off by a few digits. How big is that number? This is the number of atoms in the known universe. And this is this 3,000-year-old game. So when this was mastered by AlphaGo, as Fei-Fei mentioned, it was a breakthrough for 3 reasons. Number one, scientifically, it didn't do all the exhaustive search. It used online data from online games. I think it was 200,000 games. So it proved that if you have access to large sets of data, not complete, you may be able to accelerate formulation of some of the solutions. Number two, it happened 10 to 20 years ahead of schedule. I had asked one of the AI experts at Berkeley, he's not at Stanford, so Fei-Fei would have given a different answer, more accurate one. I said, before this happened, how far are we away from mastering Go? He said 10 to 20 years. So it happened, on average, 15 years ahead of expectations. And number three, this guy, 33-year-old Lee Sedol, who had been playing Go in Korea since age 3, was an inspiration for all the parents with young daughters and sons who said, if you study hard, if you do STEM, if you work hard, you have a shot at being Lee Sedol, 18-time world champion, the most insightful player on the planet. Suddenly, he was beaten by a machine. And what do you do? Who do you inspire to be? How do you inspire the next generation? What do you teach the kids? And in the subsequent presidential elections in Korea, all 4 candidates said the 4th industrial revolution is an industrial policy. They haven't figured out what to do with it yet, but this is a trend that's happening. What we see here is a curve for the 4th industrial revolution. As the amount of innovation and information is going up, driven, for the most part, what's happening in the valley, time value of that information is shrinking, and the time to respond is shrinking. And by the time we figure things out, we operate in this gray zone called the too late zone. I'll give you 2 examples. After we launched the Center for the 4th Industrial Revolution at the Presidio about 2 years ago, we opened centers in India, China, Japan, and we're now in the 3rd phase of opening additional centers in a number of countries, South Africa, Colombia, Israel, so on and so forth. I was talking to the chief scientist of Israeli Innovation Authority, Ami Applebaum. I said, Ami, you are the startup nation. Why are you interested in this? He said, Murat, my daughter is an oncologist at a hospital in Massachusetts, and she developed a blood test to detect pancreatic cancer long before the symptoms kick in. And she needed data from nearby hospitals. She could touch the data, she could see the data, but she could not use the data because of HIPAA, privacy laws. So laws that were designed to protect our privacy are getting in the way of new technologies. And secondly, in Rwanda, they have been, it's one of the most beautiful places on the planet. If you haven't been there, this is sponsored by the Rwandan government. If you haven't been there, please go. It's a country of 1,000 hills. They have health clinics, but women were dying because of bleeding during childbirth. We don't see it here because we have all types of bloods, but how do you store all kinds of blood types in a clinic on 1,000 hills? You cannot. So with Gavi, they started launching a program using Zipline from Half Moon Bay to store blood in a centralized place. They get an SMS text and put it on the drone, and they send the blood type. And they saved the lives of 920 women in the first 6 months. I'll pass the message on to the president. But anyone could intercept a drone and inject it with a virus. and killed the whole population. The drone is flying all over the country, and they wanted to use data for agriculture. They didn't have data policy, and they could also prevent poaching of the guerrillas. And number three, the Civil Aviation Authority had said, Mr. President, you cannot fly drones because they interfere with flights. And he wanted to certify each drone one at a time, like they do with airplanes. And by the time they certified one drone, 100 new models were out. So they were operating in way too late zone. So there's a new technology, and the lack of the underlying protocols, as we call them, legal frameworks, are preventing them from scaling. Another technology I want to briefly mention is 3D printing. It's not just AI. At ETH Zurich, which is one of the technical universities in Switzerland, they're able to 3D print a personalized heart made of silicon. They take your measure and print it on the spot. It now beats for 2 hours, so we don't recommend anyone trying it, unless you want to go out famous. And, but it will beat forever. And with that, we can get rid of the #1 health disease that has the highest number of deaths, cardiovascular diseases. But who gets to benefit from it? We're already seeing, as we heard earlier today, that there's a gap between the privileged few and the rest of the world. And there's a real risk that all of us who are in that privileged few will take advantage of all of these AI, 3D printing, et cetera, wearables, and the gap will be so much that it will be impossible for the rest of the society to catch up. That's not morally right, it's not economically right, and it's not socially right. So at the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, what we're doing is we're working on creating what we call a new operating system, new regulations, new policies, new norms, to co-design it globally with private sector, with universities, with governments, and with ethicists, civil society organizations. And these are the technologies we're working on. As you can see, we're 100% buzzword compliant. 3 final remarks. We talked about data. People said data is the new oil. One of the terms I heard in our annual meeting in Davos was, if data is the new oil, China is new Saudi Arabia. However, data is not the new oil, it's the oxygen. And the second part, which Shannon will talk about, is ethics. How do we ensure that we are ethical in what we develop, and whose ethics? And the third one is, who get access to AI? Within societies, we have this divergence between the privileged few and the rest of the society. However, there's a bigger risk that smaller nations with no access to large sets of data, or larger nations, here I will single out Nigeria, where they have the potential for large data but they don't have it, will fall behind those who have large sets of data. So it's not just within a society, but between nations. And the discussion now is, should AI be a human right? And that's one of the topics that we'll be debating. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Murat. And then Shannon, please.
All right, thank you very much. So a few years back, maybe 5 years or so ago, when I would tell people that I was an AI ethicist, whether it was at a philosophy conference or an industry conference, they would look at me like I was an alien, and like I had just said the most nonsensical thing they'd ever heard. So fast forward a few years, and suddenly the landscape has radically changed. In January, KPMG listed AI ethicist as one of the top 5 AI hires that companies need to succeed. And now that's actually also a job title that I have. So it's an interesting road that brought us here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how we got here and why we have to think about ethics when we think about AI. First of all, ethics is always a part of how we should think about new technologies, not just AI. And they're not unrelated concepts. Ethics, in fact, is an evolved social technology. Like all tech, it's a tool for bringing our values into the world. And technologies themselves have ethical dimensions. They're not value neutral. They're never mere objects. They always reflect our needs, our desires, our judgments about what is good or worth doing. So every technology already presupposes some vision of the good life, some possible way of living better. So what does ethics have to do with AI? Well, first of all, AI is being used to automate decisions with immense ethical consequences. Already, we see AI being used to automate decisions in lending, hiring, parole, the kinds of decisions that can determine how well or how poorly our lives go. And we need to be sure that AI remains well aligned with humane values and that it promotes human flourishing. It's a powerful technology, and anything that creates or redistributes power needs close ethical attention. But to get the ethics of AI right, we also have to understand what AI is and what it isn't. Because some of the things that people talk about when they talk about AI, and even when they talk about the ethical dimensions of AI, can be misleading. So AI today is task-specific. It's narrow. It's not artificial general intelligence, or AGI. Human-level AI is not what we have, and it's not what we're going to have for the foreseeable future. So the AI that we have today does not replicate human intellect. It doesn't replace us. It doesn't do what we do with our brains, with our minds. When we talk about machine learning, we're not talking about a machine that thinks or a machine that understands the world and learns the way that humans learn. We're talking about a machine that can do iterative statistical prediction or optimization in mathematical space, right? That's a very different thing than human intelligence. So we have to be careful to understand what AI really is. The AI we have today doesn't require or possess consciousness, understanding, sentience, the ability to feel or suffer, or any sort of independent agency that would allow it to carry responsibility or exercise freedom. It's not this. It's not this.
Right.
So put those things out of your mind. It's more like this, and this, and this. I'll explain what I mean. AI is a mathematical prosthetic for human brains. It amplifies and extends the power of human intelligence. It allows us to do things that we might not be able to do otherwise. It's also an accelerant. That's what I mean when I say AI is powerful. It can amplify and accelerate social forces and phenomena that are already existing in our society. And that can be a good thing or a dangerous thing. And it's a mirror. AI is a mirror of human-generated realities, data, judgments, actions. It can magnify or distort us, but what it reflects back is always us. So when people talk about, for example, an issue in AI ethics like bias, they ask, how can AI be biased if it's just math? But math is only as good as our ability to see and identify what needs to be counted. And ML and AI systems are only as good as the data sets that we use to train and test them. So the old saying in software engineering, garbage in, garbage out, or GIGO. But many data sets undercount, misdescribe, or reflect biased human judgments and actions towards marginalized and minority groups. So AI can reflect or even amplify and accelerate harmful and biased human patterns in our data. So because it's just math, AI can't tell the truth from lies or good from bad in the data we feed it. That's our job. AI is math, so it's incapable of racism, misogyny, fear, hate, or any of the destructive human emotions or vices. It can only reflect and amplify our own, but it can do so very, very well. So when we talk about ethical AI, we mean AI that's safe, reliable, fair, just, transparent, beneficial, and accountable to people. And ethical AI means taking deliberate account of the accelerant effects and the mirror effects of AI and assuming human responsibility for their impact on our lives and our institutions. When we talk about ethical AI, we're not talking about AI that's a moral being. AI that carries our moral responsibility for us. AI might one day help us find a cure for your loved one's cancer, but it won't know why that matters or why that's good. Only we can know that. So we do have a new road ahead of us, a road that includes careers in AI like AI ethicist and many other related careers that will manage the social implications of AI. So if we do it right, life with AI can be more humane than life without it. But that kind of future won't happen automatically. It's not AI's default setting. It'll have to be a choice that we make to improve our machines by improving ourselves. So the road ahead is steep, the road ahead is curvy, the road ahead is bumpy. But if we get this right, if we develop AI ethically, if we drive this road responsibly and with care for one another, we can get to a future with AI worth wanting. Thank you.
Very well said. Well, great. That sets, I think, great context for a couple of questions that we have time for with the whole panel. I think for those who've been in this business a long time, like I have, the first phase of Silicon Valley was tied to the underlying silicon and then automation of rational tasks, content-less applications, word processing, spreadsheets, databases, and things of that ilk. The question of when did all of this happen? This quote-unquote AI phenomenon, it's a little bit like going broke. It's a slow, but then suddenly you're broke. So it's upon us today, what's happening. I think the earlier presentations put some context on the choices. The conversation from the folks from Spur with the 4 quadrants, I think, was a really nice framing for a big question that I want to tee up to the panel at first here, which is, if you think about the fact that most of the cultural and ethical and regulatory frameworks that we all live with are based upon nation states. And nation states, as we've known them, are basically based on geopolitical boundary lines, which oxygen, internet protocol, and data flows occur seamlessly across these borders. So that puts the major corporations of the world today in a position of being more or less the creators of these new nation-state frameworks. And I think given the panelists' positions and the things they've stated, there's a technology component, there's an academic component, and there's a policy component. So you can think of it as TAP, technology, academics, and policy, as fundamental. So with that in mind, maybe Murat, we can start with you because you have really a framework for the fourth industrial revolution as it relates to the World Economic Forum and the corporates that are present in this discussion.
Yeah. So thank you, Daniel. What we have seen is a term that I heard 14 months ago for these corporations was data oligarchs. They're the new powers. But countries have realized that they have the data being collected in their nations, and their instinct is to keep it within the boundaries, and so that they can monetize the data, and that's causing all kinds of downstream issues for companies, because forget about AI, if you're a multinational and you have to treat data in different countries differently, and you cannot optimize supply chain, et cetera. But when we talk to these countries, and we're now in San Francisco working with 27 governments, and then we have 8 more centers around the world, they realize that in order for them to cure rare diseases, they need to share data. In order to address environmental issues, they need to share data. In order to improve agricultural yields, they need to share data, because otherwise data will be biased. So when you talk to them about the impact for their citizens, they're saying, well, maybe there's an alternative way. And that's what we're seeing. And about 2 weeks ago, Prime Minister of Japan, which is second or third largest economy in the world, called for a new data sharing protocol, which we're working on. And if we do that, then if you look at Japanese society, they have the population peaked at 125 million. 4 million people with dementia. We heard about aging. And that will double in the next 10 to 20 years, and it will cripple the Japanese economy. And with these new technologies, we can accelerate the formulation of these solutions or use autonomous vehicles and shared services to aid the aging society, augmented with human expertise, as Shannon and Fei-Fei mentioned. But in order to do that, they need to share data. So they're coming to the realization that we need to look at it not just from a geographic base, but being able to share it across the world. Not all the data, because some is sensitive. So we're looking at decoupling who owns it, what you can do with it, and who gets paid. And there are some promising signs. And a lot of multinational corporations are engaged in it because they realize that it's needed for their business, not only for that, but for the society.
Interesting. And from an academic perspective, Feifei, I mean, you commented on the biases that are inherent in the programming process, if you will, in the algorithms. How do you see both the consciousness, which we'll get to Shannon talk a little bit about the ethics, but the underpinnings, because you have had experience in the corporate world as well, the underpinnings of sort of the free market versus the social implications and the biases of, because we are at a stage in the industry by default where we don't have the right representation across the board in the quote-unquote programming community.
So I think the realization that machines are, reflecting of our own values, and the outcome of AI and machine learning products and algorithms are reflective of what we feed it, is actually has an interesting history. At the beginning, it was not, when AI and machine learning is new, many of us are not that aware. Let's take face recognition as an example, right? In the past couple of years, thanks to the work of many AI technologists and also activists that exposed this issue of bias in face recognition of many of the world's large company or startups algorithms. But because of that exposure of bias, now I see a new wave of effort in changing that, both in academia and in industry. In academia, from my colleagues at Stanford to worldwide colleagues in the machine learning and computer vision community, we are seeing a continuous influx of academic papers and projects that are looking at unbiasing algorithms or auditing algorithms. We also see that there is an effort by my former student and a bunch of colleagues that they're putting together a more nuanced data set of faces that are more representative of humanity. So the progress has been an encouraging one. It's not by no means enough yet. There needs to be way more effort. But the companies are realizing that by recognizing this bias and combating this bias, it's not only an ethical responsibility, it's actually good for their own products.
Right. Interesting. Shannon, maybe you pick up on that.
Yeah, I'll just add that, going back to the mirror analogy, one of the great things about a mirror is that it can show you that you need to wash some dirt off your face, right? It can show you, what in your own image maybe you need to address. And I think what we're seeing from a lot of this AI bias showing up in surprising and unanticipated places is we're able to see some of the inequities in society and some of the unfair judgments in society that went a lot deeper than many people realized and had impacts that were more profound than people were willing to admit.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm grateful that both in industry and in research, we're being forced to confront these things now and work on them, because the only way to get it out of the AI in many cases is to get it out of our society, to get it out of our institutions.
Right.
There's a limited range of technical solutions available to us to mitigate and de-bias, but they don't go far enough right now. Mm-hmm. So it really does put pressure on us to do better in order to make AI better.
Interesting. All good. I'll go back to Murad on a comment about the higher level markets, because you are playing and spending most of your time with large corporations who are impacted by these decisions, some of which may go against their earnings, if you will. So are you seeing pressure at a high level with your constituents to think through And how do you think the markets will respond to corporations who take, if you will, an ethical or social or more responsible framing as opposed to radical pursuit of a free market return on investment in a PE?
I think this January was a pivotal moment. We saw that in our conference in Davos. And impact on humanity, human lives, took over the economic issues.
Mm-hmm.
And inclusion was the number one talked about topic. So we see a huge shift, and we're seeing that in Silicon Valley as well. The employees are expecting their companies to be more ethical in their technology that develops. So I think we have both the broader societal expectation from these corporations where they operate, and also from within their employee base that they need to take this seriously. And we're very, very, very optimistic about the response, both from the big tech giants and also from smaller corporations.
Yeah, well, thank you. We're really running out of time for this panel, and I wanted to just make sure that everyone really takes stock of the fact that while these techniques are old, I think Feifei will comment on the underlying techniques, and Shannon did a nice job of describing the fact that this is not general intelligence, this is machines working with data to apply really augmented capabilities, that this blend of the next generation students who are being trained and thinking through the implications, large corporations having the reality that they're, if you will, younger and fresher employees to the topic won't stand for it. I hope everyone recognizes that the Bay Area is effectively a microcosm or a superset, one or the other, of what's going on. And this conference in particular is a framing for everyone to be thinking deeply about these broad implications. And I want to thank the panel, because there really aren't three better people to represent this framing. I'll ask, we've got another minute here, if there are any parting comments that each of you would like to make within that context. So maybe we'll start with you, Shannon.
Sure. Yeah, I think I'll just say that I think we are in a cycle where we're coming down from the initial over-optimism about technology, and we're now in a place of understandable, sometimes suspicion and cynicism about technology and about where it's taking us. But what I'm really hopeful is that we're making the changes now that will allow us to climb up to that right balance of optimism about technology and the future, so that the promise of technology is something that we're able to realize and share.
Serve us all. There you go. Murat?
When we talk about data, we talk about data from people, but there are more things than people generating data. By some estimates, by next year, there will be 20 billion things. So when we look at data and bias and authentication, we should really take a broader perspective and look into the hundreds of billions of these things, and how do we make sure that they're ethical things as well.
Very good. Feifei?
I just want to say that we know AI will change the world, but the most important question is who will be changing AI. And this is the time to invest in the future generation of AI leaders, technologists, practitioners who have the human-centered view of this technology.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Russell.